Well, good evening, everybody. Do you have a blessed TI today? How many of you had a great experience on your last time out with individuals? You want to tell us about it? You don't want to tell us about it? You want to tell us about it? Well, why don't you come up and come to the TCI mic? The only mic you can use when testifying with TCI. Yes. What happened? You might want to face them, not me. I know I'm interesting, but yes. What happened? Who did you see? And what did they say? And
well, we went to this one lady's house. Her name was Jenny. And her yard needed cleaning, so we cleaned her yard.
Wow. Thank you so much. That's it?
Oh, you want me to tell the rest of the story?
Well, I hope there might be more, but if there's not, we're good with that.
Well, I mean, I could elaborate about cleaning her yard, but the important part came afterwards, when we had a Bible study. Narlin and I have been visiting her for a while, although I know that before I was with Narlin, he visited her for a long time. And this time we had a Bible study, like we usually do. But this Bible study was special, because we studied about the Sabbath. And she accepted the Sabbath with her husband.
Thank you. How many of you are going to just join me in filling in the blanks of what happened there? And thank you so much for all the details. And was there anything else you wanted to add?
Not really.
Okay. How many of the rest of you have had studies with people this semester that you met several semesters ago? Anybody where you finally got to Bible studies this one? Well, yeah, this has been the experience on our group too. Some people we've visited for 2 years and just maintained relationship and connection with them. And this last week, 2 of them asked for Bible studies. And so you're like, what? You asked for Bible studies on the last week? Now I have to go to Europe and stuff? How am I going to do this? But still, we're going to do that because these are God's people, and somehow they've been touched by the ministry that we collectively have been involved in. Anybody else that had someone that started to show a spiritual interest in this semester's TCI? Okay, some people are nodding their heads. Oh yes, please, come up and look down upon us.
I'll try not to look down on you guys.
That's why I stand up here.
Yeah, so we have a contact or a friend named Georgia, and we've been visiting her for the last about 2 years, just kind of coming and singing to her, and we've asked her if she wanted, yard work, and she said her husband took care of that, and if not her husband, her friend would take care of that. So we were just trying to figure out, where to connect with her, and we would bring her flowers and stuff, and she really appreciated us coming to her house. But this semester, in particular, I just ended up visiting her just myself, and I just started asking her questions about her beliefs and just kind of just her experience. And she just started talking about how she was wanting to know more about the Bible. And I was like, well, we do offer Bible studies. And I don't know, she didn't seem quite ready for that, but she said, I've been reading a lot, and I was wondering if you knew about any books about the giants in the Bible. And so I was like, that's a good question. So I was just thinking as we were talking, And I made a connection. I was like, well, I do have a book called Noah, that book that we have a ton of them that we've been giving out. And I said, well, I know that in the Bible it talks about giants happening before the flood. And she's like, oh, yeah, and that's why God sent the flood to destroy the giants, right? And I was like, well, let's just take it from that. Yeah, let's just take that. And then said, but I actually have that book. Would you like to read it? And this book is actually basically a couple chapters selected out of the Patriarchs and Prophets. So I ended up giving that to her. And then, so she read that book. And then after that, she was just like, still wanted more to read. She ended up giving
Did she like that book?
She really liked it, yeah. And I ended up giving her Ministry of Healing and Steps to Christ. So she's not quite to the point. I think that the Bible workers are going to be trying to get her to do Bible studies, but I know that she's at least reading Ellen White's writings, and she's getting into her Bible more. So that was wonderful.
Isn't that great? We're actually counseled to give, one of the first books to give people is Patriarchs and Prophets. Many times we give people, Desire of Ages or Steps to Christ, but actually we're counseled to give them Patriarchs and Prophets, and especially important if they've never read anything in the Bible, because it covers the first chapters and stories, lays the foundation. So that was a good call. And wow, exciting. Anybody else? Okay, come on up. Yeah, tell us about what happened in your group.
So this isn't a testimony from today, but I wanted to share that last semester my family came on TCI with Erwin and our group, and they were inspired to start TCI in our home in West Virginia. And I wanted to thank Weimar for inspiring my family to bring this to our hometown.
What happened when they brought it?
They went and cleaned one of the church members who weren't able to come to church anymore. They went and cleaned her house, and she was really blessed by it.
Amen. How many of you had people come to one of the music concerts? Raise them up high. Let me see this. Yeah, this was great. I talked to so many of these people at the concert, and one couple said, yeah, they come and clean stuff, but what we really like is just them visiting us. And so many were telling me about how much of a blessing that was to them, but it was really a blessing to see them here and have them interacting, and it just was very exciting. I think we've had over, I don't know if Nicole is here, but last time I checked, we had over 70 first-time visitors to the campus within the last 2 weeks. Amen. So this is a result of getting out into the community, and now they've come here, over 70 of them. I don't think some groups have captured what TCI is, maybe, because I hear about doing things that are not related to building relationships with people. And that's good, but many of you have gone back again and again and built relationships with people in the community. And this is just dynamite. All right. We're nearing the end of the year for the college. And then a few short weeks after that for the academy. And so finishing up, some of my TCI group, this is their last TCI. They were a little pensive about that today. But I thought we might talk about that a little bit, because when you come to the end of a school year, you kind of reevaluate things. How many of you ever noticed that you reevaluate things? Like, what am I going to do next? Am I coming back to this place? Am I going somewhere else? Some people are for sure going somewhere else. Some people are coming back. And so I thought I would look through the Bible today and remind myself of some of the last things people said, last things they did. I don't know, the thought struck me is that the Advent movement is a last day movement. It's a last word movement. And in fact, if you looked at the prophecy that defines Adventism, it would probably be that give me five prophecy, the 2300 day, right? So you have the rebuilding of the temple. And that basically gives God word, an overview of God's word from the first to the last, doesn't it? It says here's how it starts and here's how it ends. So it gives the word throughout. And then 27 AD, the next date, that's the end of Christ's private life. It's the last word as a you might say young man, and then he is baptized and begins his last word ministry, right? And then on the cross, for sure, that's his last word, isn't it? On earth, at least. He says what? It is finished. You've heard of the 7 last words, and there are 7 sayings on the cross. Of course, we won't go through them all, but that's the last word for that section of Christ's ministry. And then you come to the end of the 70 weeks, and who was it there giving his last word? Stephen. He says, I see heaven open, Christ seated at the right hand of the Father. And he gives his last word. But at every place, every stage, the last word is also the beginning of something brand new. The gospel goes to the whole world in one generation as a result of those last things. Last words can be very powerful. They can change your life. What's the last date in that prophecy? It's the Advent movement, and it's the last prophecy, right? It's the last time prophecy. I know some people try and mess around with that when their ministry's running out of money and they want more money. They try and come up with a new last word, thinking that might help, but it only hurts them in the long run. But that last word, 1844. And then, we're kind of a last day movement, giving the last trumpet call, the last of the 3 trumpets, right? The 3rd angel's message. And the last part of that message is a revelation of Christ's character of love. And that 3rd angel joins with the 4th angel in a loud cry, giving the last message of God to this planet. How many were thankful to be a part of a last day movement, a last word movement? But I wanted to say, some of you need to say last words perhaps before you leave this place that you haven't yet said. Maybe some of you here, because we're kind of in-house here tonight. It's not a meeting where we have a lot of public, although it would be fine. We have basically just us kind of in-house. And maybe some of us have not yet said the words we need to say before we leave. Some of you were at R&R, and Pastor West talked about his experience with cancer and his testimony. Was that a blessing to you? He just has been emailing me and telling me that his mother's cancer has come back, and he wants to get her here just so that she can say the last words if her life is not as long as he would like. But then he also told me about talking with many of you and about how some of you made recommitments to God, or maybe commitments for the first time. In fact, this weekend, one of you is getting baptized, saying, look, this is it. This is the last of me. I'm dying to myself, and I'm coming up out of that grave. I'm crucified with Christ, therefore I no longer live. It's my last word. And then this week, I've been, this last week, talking to people that have thought many times about ending their life. They were thinking about ending their life physically. And as I talked with them, I said, I said to them, Christ has suffered everything for everything that you're suffering. He already did that. And he's already died. You want someone to die? Someone's already died. And will you accept what he has done instead of trying to take his place and do it on your own? Why don't you let God do that? And 11 people said yes to that. 8 of them were baptized last Sabbath. And I just wrote them all emails today. Because I know the devil tries to resurrect suicidal thoughts. He comes not to hurt, kill, and destroy. But Christ has come to give us life more abundantly. And so, are we going to end our school year with last words that really can be first words, just like we saw in that major prophecy? How many want to see that happen? Maybe you need to share with somebody before you leave some words. Maybe you need to share words with the Lord. I don't know. All I know is when I was your age, I didn't fathom the importance of sharing last words. I only got myself in real trouble. And it was only until I was working some years later, in God's mercy, He spared my life, that I was in a hospital one day. And I was assigned to a patient who was dying and had an aortic aneurysm that was about to burst. So I was assigned to this patient, and I wasn't really interested in anything very serious like taking care of people that were dying. This was a little bit too intense, so I asked to be reassigned, but the patient's sons were both doctors at the hospital. One was a cardiologist and one was a cardiothoracic surgeon. And they liked me for all the wrong reasons, because I was funny and kind of, I was not what I should be, but they liked that. And so they wanted me to be taking care of their mother while she died. And so I went into her room the first day, and she started to talk to me, and then she said to me, "What do you think happens to people when they die?" And I was like, I should not have said this, but I said, I don't know. I never have died, and I've never talked to anybody. I've never talked to anybody that died. And she said, "That's very flippant." And I said, "I know it is, but I mean, we do have a chaplain. I could call the chaplain for you." And she says, "No, I want to talk to you." Well, she was getting ready to say her last words. She was going to die. And she wanted to talk to somebody serious, and that was not me at that time. So I asked to be reassigned. They said no. And so I started to take sick days. And I would call in, "Has she died yet?" "No, she's still living." "Oh, man. I'm running out of money." This is how shallow I was. So I ran out of vacation time. I had to go back to work. And she saw me come back in, and she was talking to me. She goes, "Oh, I thought maybe you had died." That's what she said to me, and I said, I thought maybe you had too, but we're both alive. And she said, "You remember those questions I was asking you?" I said, "Yes." She goes, "I still have these questions." And I said, I just don't want to talk about those things. It's the stuff I talk about all day now. Everything I do, I talk about this with people, because I do this all the time now, but then I wasn't there. And my life was a very shallow life. So then she said to me, she goes, "Let me ask you a question. is your dad a minister? And I said, how did you know that? She goes, I knew it. And I said, I shouldn't have said, how'd you know that? Because that was it. And she goes, you know, my dad was a minister too. And, but I grew up and I rejected the religion of my father. I raised my kids all atheists. I am as well. But it's not working for me now that I'm about ready to die. It's not working. It doesn't work. And then I suddenly understood why her sons really liked me, you know, because I also was, at that time, proclaiming atheism. Well, she began to ask me questions, and she'd say, well, you know, what should I do? I said, look, if you were going to get interested in God, you would pray and ask him to come into your life. And she goes, well, how do you pray? I said, I don't pray. But if you were to do that, that's what you would do. She goes, well, what would your dad say? And I said, well, my dad would say, you know, you accept Jesus, you tell God that you believe, and if you confess with your mouth and believe in your heart, then you're going to be saved. And so he said, well, that sounds like something I'd be interested in doing. I said, well, that's great. Would you like me to call the chaplain? And this went on. I began sneaking past her room. I was just like, and she'd hear me out there, and she'd go, is that you? It's like a nightmare for an atheist. It was terrible. It's a terrible thing. And I remember the day that this lady died. I went in to work, and I went on rounds, and she still was there. And so I had an assistant, a nursing assistant, and I said, would you go in and do these things, because she's going to want to try and talk to me again. So, same thing. I thought, you know, she's lived here now for 3 weeks. It's not going to be today. But that was the day she was going to die. And later in the shift, the light came on, and nursing assistant ran up to me and said, she has terrible pain and she's sweating, and I think she's dying. So I ran down there. Sure enough, she was dying. I went, called their sons. The sons came over. The attending physician ordered some pain medication to give to the patient, IV, so they could not have as much pain. So I went down to I drew the medication. I went down to give the medication. And so I was getting ready to put it in their little heparin lock, and as I was about to put that in there, she said, what's that? Gasping. I said, well, it's something to make you feel better so you don't feel the pain. She goes, I don't want that. Gasping. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? She said, looking right in my eyes, one atheist to another atheist, she said to me, I'd like you to pray for me. And the charge nurse was there, Dottie. Dottie was the most fearsome charge nurse known in the history of charge nurses. She was a combination of a sergeant and an angel. She kind of was a nursing and spiritual enforcer. And I said to the lady, I said, look, I'll call the chaplain for you. I don't pray. And she looked at me, she said, what did you say? I said, I don't pray, I'll call the chaplain. She jumped over the bed with her skirt on. Still don't know how she did that. But she jumped over the bed, she grabbed me by the throat, and she began to shake me and she said, you pray for this lady, or she's not the only one that's going to be dying. That's what she said. This was a rather direct approach. And so I did. I prayed for that lady. I had not prayed in years. And a great peace came over her. And this peace haunted me. Because as I prayed for that lady and she said her last words on this earth were, "Will you pray for me?" That was her last words to me. And then the last thing I saw was this great peace that came over her because she had accepted Christ. And to die was gain. The next thing she'd see would be Jesus. Now, the whole idea of the Christian gospel is that you say that long before your deathbed. You say that at your baptism. You say that every day. I die daily, right? So those were powerful last words in my life. They worked on me. And suddenly, I was in another country at the time, and I just realized I am headed the wrong way. And one other thing the lady said to me was, "Did you know that all the famous atheist fathers, most of them were ministers? Did you know that Karl Marx grandfather was a rabbi and he got upset because Marx didn't keep the Sabbath and they moved so they could make money and it made him so mad he came up with a different worldview? Did you know that Nietzsche's father was a Lutheran minister? Did you know?" And she started to click off these names. That's what she had come to lead her conversion. So I started to look that up, and I recognized that all these people, that was true, what she had said. In fact, I read a book later that was called The Fathers of the Faithless. It talked about the fathers and how they had influenced their children who had become faithless. So it all worked on me, and finally, with another couple stories I could tell you, but finally, that lady's last words led me to my first words of truly accepting Christ in my life. Those last words were not meaningless. So I don't know what the Lord's doing in your life here at the end of the school year, but I remember reading the other day about Noah's carpenters. Have you ever read about Noah's carpenters? Noah's carpenters, the phrase is used a number of times in Ellen White's writings, and she talks about how they listened to all the preaching of Noah. Noah was preaching last words. They were the last words to that generation. There was only one place to get out of there, and that was the ark. Noah's name means grace, and so he was preaching grace and mercy in the face of judgment. You can find grace and you can find mercy in the ark. That was his message. Get in the ark. Find grace. Nobody got in the ark except for 8 people. And they were all the people that decided to no longer practice polygamy. It goes to great lengths to show you that in the Old Testament. They were the ones that said to the culture of that day, we're not going to have the sexual immorality, we're going to get in the ark. But Ellen White uses that metaphor and she says, don't be like Noah's carpenters. Don't listen to the message. Don't study the message without making a decision for the message. That's what she said. How many of you don't want to be like one of Noah's carpenters? You want to get in the ark. So maybe you've not, gotten in the ark, but maybe you should. There's something more final than final exams. In our TCI group, we had a person we were studying with here that made a decision to accept the second coming, made a decision to accept the Sabbath. Then her kidneys shut down 2 weeks ago. She went to dialysis and then she died. One of our TCI Bible studies. Her last words to Nathan Polk were, "Do you think I should grow weed?" I asked her what the last words was. Nathan said, "No, I don't think so." She goes, I think you're right. I don't think I should do that anymore. And God was leading her along. Amen. We hope to see her in the kingdom. Amen. So, there's many last words in the Bible. I'm not going to go through them all, but they're pretty poignant. Stephen, when he's dying at the end of the 70 weeks, "Lord, do not hold this sin against them." Great last words, right? And then the troubling words. Sapphira, when asked what was the price of the field, lied, not knowing her husband had died. And she said, "Yes, that is the price," and she was struck dead. Those were her last words. Samson, "Let me die with the Philistines." Terrible last words. Saul, "Draw your sword and run me through, or these uncircumcised fellow will come and abuse me." Herod, his silence at the end was what brought him, because they said, "This is the voice of a God, not of man," and he said nothing, and so he was eaten with worms. Goliath, "Come here and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." And then, of course, didn't end that way for him. Or look at this one, Elisha. "You should have struck the ground 5 or 6 times. Then you would have defeated the enemy and completely destroyed it. But now you will only defeat it 3 times. So, there's many others I could read today. It could be a sermon series on last words. And then you have Moses' last words in Joshua chapter 1, verse 1 through 7. Very famous last words, which I don't have time to go through because I told too many stories. But I guess, how many of you get the point I'm trying to make? The last words of God have led to your ability to have any words at all. When he died on the cross and said, "It is finished," it wasn't because it was finished in terms of what he's doing for you. Finished up to that point. How many are glad that he still is doing something for you? Ever lives to make intercession. He's promised to come again. But he had finished that segment. And how many are thankful for that? He died for you and I. So, I want to encourage you, in the midst of all the things you're finishing up, I'm praying that you'll finish well. And I gave my TCI group the option of working on things today for school or going out. But probably the most important thing you could accomplish here is to settle things with God. That's the most important thing you can do. And God may be tugging at your heart to do that. I know that happened at R&R because Wes told me that. But follow through on that. Follow through on your commitments, your recommitments to God. You're never going to be sorry doing that. you're going to end up not wasting time. I wasted a lot of time. And thankfully, I had an older roommate when I was coming back to the Lord, and the seminary. I went to the seminary to try and learn about Christianity. I don't advise that, but anyway, I got in and was taking these courses. And I remember I lived with this guy. He was 60 years older than I was. It was my grandfather. And I'd go to the seminary, and every day I'd come home, and he'd go, "What'd they teach you?" And I'd tell him, and he'd say, "Get me volume 2 of the testimonies. Read me page 300," or whatever it was. I'd read it. It'd be exactly the opposite of what I heard, or sometimes exactly the same. And then he wouldn't say anything. He would just go, "Let us pray." Every morning he'd get up, he'd bring me cereal, he'd give me oatmeal, an egg, a boiled egg every day. Surprised I'm still alive. Oatmeal, an egg, and he'd have this little bathrobe on, and he'd come around like this, and he'd say, "I don't know why I'm still alive, but it must be for you." Every day. He went to my basketball games. I can remember taking him to the basketball game. He goes, "What are you doing? What are you trying to do?" I said, "We're trying to put the ball through that hoop." He goes, "Why?" I said, "To score a point." "Well, a point for what?" And I'd say, "It's to win." "To win what?" You know, he had these questions. I said, "To win the game." So then he goes, "This is the craziest thing I've ever seen." Every time I get the ball, he starts praying. Oh, I see him up there like he's praying, and then I say, "What were you praying about?" "That you wouldn't hurt yourself for this. You're going to get hurt. Why not be a martyr?" That's what he'd say, that kind of stuff he'd say. And one day he said, can I pray for your team? We're all huddled. Puts his arm around her. He says, "Dear Lord, protect these ignorant young men from injury that is not needed." I don't know how my grandson got to know them. Protect him too. And then he ends the prayer by saying, "Oh Lord, when they're converted, let them strengthen the brethren." Amen. My team loved it. Like my grandfather. They were like, "Whoa." He would sit there every game, just kind of like watching back and forth. Every time I got the ball. They renamed their team called the Patriarchs after him. He was the patriarch. But they really did listen to him. When he died, there were 500 people at the funeral. And he didn't even live in that city. Because they listened to him. And I remember his last words to me. They came as a result, well, 2 times, 2 things, just quickly. I remember his last communion. His last communion that he ever had, the last time he ever washed anyone's feet were my feet. And I got angry at him earlier in the day because he asked me to go to communion. I didn't know it was communion. He asked me to go to Vespers. And I said, "Man, I'm tired. I worked all night and this and that. I was working night shift as a nurse going to the seminary." I said, "I don't really want to go." He goes, and finally he goes, "We're going. We're not going to go." So I think this was like the closest he came to striking the rock. But he stamped his cane, and I said, "Okay, we'll go." So we went. And on the way there, he goes, "I'm really sorry that I did that." But then we got there and we found out it was communion. Pioneer Memorial Church. It's like a long church. Looks like a freight train. You come in the doors and it's long. And I'm there in this thing, and he goes, what kind of service are they having? I said, I think it looks like a communion service. He goes, oh, I'm so sorry. I said, it's okay. I'm sorry. It's okay. He didn't have his hearing aids in, and he didn't think I could hear him. And I was like, it's okay. Please, don't say that anymore. It's embarrassing. And so he didn't until we got to the middle of the church. Then he said it again. And I said, why don't we just sit here? He goes, no, I want to be right to the front. It's like, oh no, Lord. Right to the front. Sitting right behind the senior pastor and the associate, who was my mentor at the time, Skip McCarty and Dwight Nelson right there. And then he does it again. Oh, Lord, I'm so sorry what I said to my grandson. Can I have your forgiveness? And I'm like, he already forgave you, Jesus paid it all. But have you forgiven? I was like, yes. And then the two pastors, they just turn around like, what did you do? So we have the service and we go down to have, the foot washing before the Lord's Supper. And I didn't realize that'd be the last time Grandfather had communion. He knelt down. Really hard for him to kneel down. And he washed my feet. And he was crying. And then he said something to me that was biblical, but I didn't even know it. He said, what I'm doing to you now, you don't understand, but later you will. And I was like, of course I understand it. I started dialoguing with him. He goes, oh no, you don't. And I certainly didn't. Some months later, he got congestive heart failure, went to the hospital, and he survived that hospital. On the way home, he told me, he says, I never want to go back there again. I'm ready to die. If they want to take me back, don't take me back. Just let me stay at home. So I honored his word, stayed at home, and his medications kind of got off. I said, I want to take you in. No, I don't want to go in. And I can remember what he said. He said to me, I'm going to die, but I want you to do something for me. I've taken my hymnal and I've marked all the hymns about heaven. Sing me my favorite songs. That's the last thing my grandfather said to me. And we sang him his favorite songs all day. And his last words changed my life. I would not be certainly a minister if he had not said those last words. I doubt I'd be alive. Last words can change things. So in these last weeks, maybe the most important thing may not be your chemistry exam. I'm not saying it's not important, but maybe the most important thing you can do is ask the Spirit what the last words He's asking you to share here are before you leave. How many want to pray about that? How many want to pray about that? Say, hey, look, how many of you are already feeling as though God's convicting you to do something you need to do, but you haven't done it? Anybody here? Okay, a number of you. So I would just say to you, don't let anything hinder you from following through on what you're supposed to do. And I know God will bless you. He's blessed me through the ministry of last words. And I know he'll also bless you. Let's pray together.